April 1st, 2026. We are in the 5th year and on day 37 since the start of the full-scale invasion. Welcome to the Situation Report. In today's report, we see important attacks on Russian targets and a failed Ukrainian column attack near Pokrovsk. And yes, you heard correctly, that was not an April Fool's joke, plus another aircraft loss, and much more. But first, a viewer photo. I received a photo of a backpack with a war and tactic patch during an alpine hike. Thank you for sending it in. I believe this patch is the highest war and tactic patch measured above sea level that has ever been sent to me. And the farthest one was somewhere near the front in Ukraine. Thank you very much for sending it in. It's always cool to get something like this, and of course it will have a place in my home. Yesterday we looked at the ongoing fire in Ust-Luga. That's one of Russia's most important oil and gas ports on the Baltic Sea. None of the loading terminals were directly hit, but oil storage tanks nearby were. As we can see on the marine traffic map, many of the tankers have gathered in the Gulf of Finland, as they still can't dock at Ust-Luga or Primorsk because both ports are still on fire. And that's almost a week after the first attack, so the attacks on the ports are still having a significant impact. Russia has launched nearly 650 Shahed drones within about 20 hours, a scale that stands out even in this war. Such numbers are nothing completely new anymore, but in this intensity and over this period of time, it becomes clear once again where this part of the war is heading. The drones were not confined to isolated areas, but were spread across the entire country. From western cities like Lusk and Ivano-Frankivsk to classic target areas like Odessa, Dnipro, and Kryvyi Rih, which we have repeatedly seen under drone attacks recently. The pattern is very clear. It's no longer just about taking out individual targets, but about applying constant pressure, everywhere at once, as often and as massively as possible. What stands out is not the individual drone, but as I said, the sheer number and duration. Because we're familiar with that kind of volume, that's typical on the Russian side, where quantity usually outweighs quality. But 20 hours. That definitely means it wasn't a brief wave of attacks, but an ongoing condition. This not only overwhelms the air defense, but also keeps it tied up for a long time. Systems overheat, personnel are under constant stress, and decisions have to be made minute by minute. And that's the real effect. Even if most of the drones are intercepted, the sheer number alone forces the Ukrainian side to split resources, set priorities, and constantly readjust. So it's a war of attrition. Air operations that don't look spectacular but constantly create pressure. And now just think about it. About 3 years ago, we saw maybe 4, 5, sometimes 20 Shaheds a day. But if we're talking about numbers now, with 650 Shahed drones spread over 20 hours across the entire country, that's still not the final result. According to the Ukrainians, meaning according to the opposing side, Russia produces about 550 Shahed drones per day. Every day. But they don't use that many in their daily or nightly airstrikes, which means theoretically they still have some in reserve. And now just imagine, Russia is still continuing to build up this capability that hasn't stopped. But now just imagine, at some point, we might reach a situation where Ukraine gets hit by about 650 drones every day, 24 hours a day, and that would be continuous. That we're no longer talking about an attack happening at night or an attack during the day and then a small one a day later or maybe nothing at all. No, what we're talking about here is a constant, continuous strain of several hundred drones every day, 24 hours a day. And that goes on for weeks or even months. That's an incredible strain that can completely overwhelm enemy air defenses and, above all, force the other side to use up enormous amounts of money. And now let's not talk about Ukraine for a moment. Let's take a look at German air defense. In effect, it barely exists at all. Of course, Germany is now rearming. They're acquiring things that should have been acquired 10 years ago. And above all, they're also getting things that might help against drones, especially against such attacks. But if we consider how many cities we have in Germany and how little air defense there is, I see a very, very, very long way to go. until we even get to the point where we can say we can stop or fight off attacks like those currently happening in Ukraine for several weeks. I see us even further away from the scenario that Ukraine will probably face in the near future, if Russia is able to further ramp up its own drone production. And thus it becomes not a daily or hourly strain anymore, but perhaps a weekly one. After significant media attention surrounding an allegedly failed attack by the 425th, the leadership of the Skala Assault Regiment at Pokrovsk has now spoken out themselves. In their statement, they say that on the 31st March, a successful counterattack was carried out on an important tactical objective in the area around Pokrovsk, which had previously been occupied by the enemy. In doing so, they took advantage of favorable weather conditions, deployed the troops in armored vehicles with additional protection, and secured the attack with reconnaissance drones, artillery, and a tank. According to the regiment, although 4 of their own armored vehicles were hit by Russian drones right at the attack target, the assault group was still able to dismount, carry out the mission, and continue the fight at the objective. They report 2 killed in action among their own losses. However, the available footage raises some questions about this account. According to the information currently available, the Ukrainian column set out early in the morning of the 31st. On March 31st, taking advantage of the fog, they moved out from the Andrivka area along the old E50 towards Pokrovsk. Why in the fog? Well, drone reconnaissance naturally suffers in fog, and attacks are usually more limited. According to reports, an M1A1 Abrams, which is an American tank, a BMP-2, an M117 Guardian, and 2 pickups were used. The convoy initially traveled several kilometers without any apparent losses, but was then stopped west of the industrial area on the outskirts of Pokrovsk, roughly here near the orange pin south of Hrishny. There, it appears to have encountered a Russian-laid minefield, which was apparently previously deployed by drone. To make matters worse, there was already road damage in the form of a blown trench since December, which Ukrainian engineers had originally created themselves to block Russian attacks. That means this was actually already known. As a result, after hitting a mine, the Abrams lost its track and was disabled. The BMP-2 went out of control, slid over the trench, and tipped over onto its right side. The remaining vehicles diverted onto a dirt road south of the route, and according to the Russians, were destroyed there by drones. Afterwards, the dismounted infantry also came under drone attacks. This is exactly where the crucial point lies. The area where the convoy was knocked out appears, according to available maps and geodata, to have been well before the actual Russian positions. So there were still several kilometers to go before reaching the city area of Pokrovsk or the presumed Russian positions. Therefore, the regiment's statement that the vehicles were hit directly at the target of the attack seems at least questionable. This rather suggests that the attack already collapsed during the approach phase, and that the dismounted forces then had to retreat on foot, or at least did not reach the actual target as a cohesive force. The choice of route and the preparation of the advance also seem problematic. To move a mechanized column along a known axis of advance in an area monitored by drones, without first effectively clearing the route of newly laid mines, is highly risky and rather suggests an operation that was poorly reconnoitered and probably partly improvised. Especially on the Ukrainian side, it has recently been observed several times that roads were systematically cleared with vampire drones before attacks or checked by other means. That means they have the means to do so. The fact that this apparently did not happen here or was not done sufficiently probably contributed significantly to the failure. A mine-clearing device on the Abrams would also have been helpful, but theoretically, you don't need that in preparation if the area wasn't scouted or wasn't properly scouted, and if you can't anticipate that there might be mines there by now. This incident once again shows a pattern that has recently been observed not only on the Ukrainian side, but especially on the Russian side. Mechanized attacks are increasingly failing not only at the enemy's main positions, but already on the way there, because of minefields, drone reconnaissance, and precise targeting of the column in open terrain. This was exactly what could be seen recently during Russian attacks in the Chandrikolovel area. Now, it appears the Ukrainian side has been hit. By the way, You can watch the full video of the destruction of the Ukrainian column on my Telegram channel, and in the comments I often read things like, well, the same thing has happened to the Russians 1,000 times, so it can happen to the Ukrainians too. Yes, that may be true. Naturally, I could have called it a Russian column and everyone would have believed it instantly, since we're so used to that. And that may be true that it happens often with the Russians, but just because it happens often with the Russians doesn't mean it should be the same with the Ukrainians. The Financial Times reports that Donald Trump allegedly threatened European countries with halting arms deliveries to Ukraine. The background, according to the report, is the demand that European countries participate in a coalition security arrangement and the possible reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. In this context, Mark Rutte is said to be in close contact with European governments in the United States. According to the available information, he pointed out that Washington is not only questioning one thing, but also the overall support for Ukraine. But what I am questioning are the American deliveries. Which deliveries does he actually want to stop as support that he hasn't already stopped a long time ago? That's like blackmailing someone by threatening to stop providing a service that I never actually provided in the first place. There was a Ukrainian missile strike in the occupied city of Vasilivka. Apparently, a water supply facility and a location of a Russian drone unit were hit. The available video shows a rather unusual scene. A Russian mobile air defense unit is positioned on a civilian building, which is actually supposed to monitor the airspace. And yes, indeed, they are monitoring it. Otherwise, we wouldn't see the video that shows the missile hitting the target area. This illustrates how difficult it has become to intercept such attacks, or it could just as well show that the cameraman was busy filming instead of defending. Especially with fast targeted strikes, there is apparently very little reaction time, even if systems are already in position. Maybe his system, we don't know what he had, but maybe he just wasn't properly equipped to intercept it. We know it was an airstrike. On some sites, this is referred to as a missile attack, which of course would be much harder to intercept. So in this case, a missile attack is also an airstrike. However, we still don't know exactly what hit there, or if it could have been intercepted at all. Still, it always looks pretty grotesque. At the same time, it's noticeable that the air defense on the Russian side is once again being used in an urban area, which to me is a clear sign that it probably would have been more dangerous than the missile itself if they had started shooting. Over Crimea, a Russian transport aircraft of the AN-26 type has been lost. By the way, the wording and the report come from Russian sources themselves. Lost, of course, means crashed or shot down. According to these reports, there were about 30 people on board. There are no official confirmations or details about the circumstances yet. It's still unclear if it was a technical failure, accident, or external cause. The AN-26 is usually used for transport tasks, such as transporting personnel and equipment or maintaining logistical links between locations. A loss of this kind therefore affects less the direct combat power of the Russian aerospace forces, and more the processes in the background that make operations possible in the first place. Especially in the area around Crimea, which is a central logistical hub for Russia, such incidents can still have noticeable effects depending on the specific function the flight was serving. Thank you to all subscribers, channel members, and the Algo crew, especially Lieutenant Colonel Renicky, Zieler Tittrick, Furley, and Meyerhofer. Please subscribe, like, comment, and see you in the next situation report.